real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back. Nathan Romas with you. Today we are going to be talking about battling the cartels from the front lines. For that, I have Matthew Thomas here. Matt began his career with the Pinal County Sheriff's Office in 1993, eventually moving through the ranks to his current position as Chief Deputy. He worked in several specialized units, from the Police Academy to 18 years in the SWAT team, narcotics, and undercover work, which took him from the world of street crime to organized crime cases in cartel-infested environments. Matt now serves as the Sheriff's Executive Officer as second in command for the agency. He is a graduate of Leadership in Police Organizations in the FBI National Academy Session 261. He is also a best-selling author, publishing the book Interceptors, The Untold Fight Against the Mexican Cartels in 2022. Matt's book details the operations he was involved in against the infamous Sinaloa cartel in the Arizona deserts. So welcome, Matt.
Hey, good joining, Nathan.
Awesome to get you on here. I think this is going to be kind of a new perspective. I don't think I've had anybody talk about necessarily stuff from the front lines in dealing with some of these cartels. So yeah, we'll get some new perspective here. If we could just start a little bit, just talking a bit about you and how you got into policing and kind of your motivation or your drive. What brought you into this world?
I think I had a desire to serve in some capacity, right? And it was really choosing. I was looking at military. I was 19 years old. I was faced with a little bit of a life decision because my then girlfriend, now wife of 31 years, had informed me that she was pregnant, right? And so I am faced with being a very young father, not having a real career, knowing I wanted to serve in some capacity, but not knowing what that looked like. And I was looking at both the military world and the police world. And so I shot out applications to, 4 or 5 different places. Pinal was the first one to call me up, and that I finished the entire process with. And in 1993, they offered me a position in detention, which is where I started, and worked in the jail for probably just under a year. It was not a requirement, as it is in some places, to work in the jail before you go to the road.
Okay.
But nonetheless, I got hired into the jail first. And that started my career. And then I knew, that I wanted to be a deputy. And so I was doing the jail piece as kind of my foot in the door and kind of learning government work because I had not worked in this environment before. And my mom she worked at the post office for a bunch of years, and she would always explain to me how government work was different.
Yeah.
And so detention was my introduction, and then moved over to the road and kind of bounced all over the place. I've had a very blessed career in the sense that I've been able to do a lot of different things.
Yeah, well, certainly, I think SWAT, narcotics, undercover. Most people, when they think of policing, think that that's like the super cool stuff going on. So to get to work in it all, it's pretty good.
Super cool sometimes, but sucks other times. The work is, I got to say, narcs. People ask me, like, what is the funnest thing you've ever done in your career? Narcotics was probably the funnest I've done because I'm a hunter too. And I think, that goes hand in hand kind of with this job, being a hunter, because we're hunting bad guys all the time. And the beauty of narcotics was you're beating them at their own game on their own territory. And so it was a lot of fun doing that.
Very cool. Could you explain to people just Pinal County, where exactly it is? I was looking it up on a map. It's kind of southeast of Phoenix, but tell us a bit about that county.
So we are right in between Phoenix and Tucson. So if you travel from one to the other, you go right through our county. Interstate 10 goes right through our county. Interstate 8 starts in our county and shoots over to San Diego. We're about 5,400 square miles, so we're a large county. And but population wise, we only have about 500,000 population. So we have a lot of remote areas in our county. that are still uninhabited, or sparsely inhabited. And so why in the state we kind of sit in the central southern part of the state where we butt up against Phoenix on one end and we butt up against Tucson on the other. So we're right in between two metro areas. And those metro areas are actually growing so rapidly that our county is starting to feel the effects of that, because we're seeing large amounts of growth in our county. And then the southwest portion of our county is some of that remote desert area. And we have a lot of Indian reservation in that area as well. We have the Tohono O'odham Indian Reservation. And that is where we face most of our cartel activity, because the from the southwest tip of our county down to Mexico is 50 to 60 miles, open desert, no real towns, no real civilization or anything. And the cartels exploit that. They have operatives in those mountaintops that are scouts watching, and they use the valleys in between the mountains to transport up, whether by foot or vehicle or whatever. That's their transport routes. And so that's what kind of makes us unique, because they really that piece of real estate is very important to the cartel for their transporting.
Okay. Yeah. So you're right close to the border. Do you maybe before actually we get into like specific operations or things you've done, I'm wondering, because you obviously went through the ranks with the service, and now do you get kind of like that perspective from both sides where it's, okay, I did this stuff at the street level on the front lines, now I'm in management, and
Right.
do you what do you take from that when you're fighting these groups, and do you ever see like the disconnect between the front lines and management? Can you kind of speak to that a bit more?
Yeah.
From where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always a disconnect, and the funny thing is the disconnect goes both ways, and a lot of times one side or the other doesn't like to admit that, but it's true, right? We're disconnected from them; they're disconnected from us, just by the design of the hierarchy. It happens that way, and a lot of times we find we particularly, because I'm second in command. I work for Sheriff Lamb, and Sheriff Lamb and I both came up as cops, and we did cop work. We love cop work. And so for me, what was important as I accepted this position, so he offered it. And part of me accepting this position was the fact that I had a greater amount of influence on the agency. And, when he put me in this position, he said just that. You are the guy that's running the agency. I am the sheriff. I'm the head of the agency, but you're running operations. And so what that allows me to do, from my perspective, I get to see the budget. I get to know the budget. I get to have an understanding of what we can spend where, how we can move money to, for needs, which the cop part of me, it helps having that, because having those street connections and having come up the way I came up, there were always times where I was like, man, I wish we could have whatever, right? Fill in the blank.
Yeah.
I wish we could have this. I wish we could have that. And I would go to my bosses. And of course, the easy answer, which pisses me off really a lot in this industry, is well, some of them aren't leaders, but leadership of any agency a lot of times uses the easy answer of no, because it's the easy answer, right? They don't want to give you an explanation, or they don't want to dive into it because they have plenty of other stuff going on, and no becomes the easy answer. So when I would go ask for something, hey, I need this piece of equipment and it would really help our operations. Nope, it's not in the budget, right? We didn't budget for it, or it's not in the budget, or whatever. And that always sucks, right? And so as a SWAT operator, as a narc, all that stuff, there was always things where I was like, man, it would be so much easier if we could just have this or that. And so getting into this position and knowing that, I now go back to my leaders of those units, and it's any unit really in our agency. I tell them, like, you got to let me know what you need. I'll figure out the money piece. Like, we'll figure out a way to get it for you, but you got to let me know what you need. And you got to let me know why, right? And you also have to understand that I know you guys and I came from you guys, so I know how you bullshit too. And I know, sometimes it's just the newest, flashiest, shiniest thing that you want, but operationally, really has it been proven, and will it really help operations, or is it just because it's the latest, greatest thing that you want on your belt?
Hmm.
And so I have to filter through all that, but um, it's been nice because coming through the ranks like that, having the understanding that I explained of what I would like to have done, as I came up, or what I'd like to have, and now having those connections with my guys and gals, and being able to have those discussions, and then being able to cut through some of the red tape BS that goes along with government to get them what they need. And that was, I kind of went on a rant there about equipment, but that all kind of goes back to the question about disconnect, and I think there's always a disconnect, but I think it's my duty as a leader to make sure I reestablish as many of those connections as possible, because if I don't, I'm failing, right? Because I can't expect my guy or gal on the street to find me, to go out of their way and find me and say, hey, it'd really be nice if this or that.
Mhm.
I've got to make sure that I'm soliciting that information, whether it's directly from them, or through the chain, that I'm constantly getting feedback, and staying connected in, because it's very easy. The hierarchy just naturally kills us.
I see it from both sides like that. I'm still one of the lowest ranks in my police service, but obviously, like especially doing the podcast, like I've talked to people at those higher levels, and it 100% is a two-way street. Management needs to be open to receiving stuff from the front lines, because a lot of people don't want to hear it. But also, as a frontline person, when you're asking for something or you need something, instead of just bitching about it, right? Like do something productive and come up with a solution. So find what you need, but also the reasons why you need it, and present that in a respectful way, I guess. So yeah, it definitely is a two-way street when it comes to those things. So yeah, I appreciate the perspective you have on both sides of this now, having gone through those ranks.
And I would say for leadership listening to this, especially leaders that are still moving up through the ranks. Maybe they're getting ready to move from sergeant to lieutenant, and they're going to have a little more pull and a little more budget insight, or lieutenants to captains, or whatever the case may be. We're in a day and age of policing where things are changing so quickly that sometimes it's hard for us as leaders to even stay up with it. But you have to somewhat trust your ground level troops,
Yes.
and trust that they are giving you their best assessment of their view and their needs. And sometimes you just got to be able to take a risk, man, and be like, this sounds like a really crazy idea, but these guys are saying it's something they need, or something that'll work. And you have to be willing to say, okay, let's go. Because here's one thing I know, from the dude that's just out of the academy to the most senior patrol guy, they've all had fantastic ideas. And if we are those leaders that constantly like, no, 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 you're going to shut down that creativity. You're going to shut down their willingness to come forward with these ideas. And dude, our youngest guys have had some brilliant ideas. They look at things a different way. And I think as leaders, if we don't recognize that and embrace that, you're not doing a service to the profession, your agency, or your citizens.
Yeah. That reminds me, a recruit I had before, and I call him that lightly. It was just on paper, but the dude was a genius. But he jumped from military over to our police service, and in the military, he had taken like all these crazy intelligence courses, and as far as I understood, he was like command of like thousands of people and like moving people around. And then when he gets to us, you can tell just by the way he talks and carries himself, very, he knows how to handle himself. And
Right.
it was like, yeah, like maybe we should get that guy's ideas. He seems pretty good at what he does. Like just because your reg number is really high, so it means you're brand new, like doesn't mean you don't know anything. So
Right.
So let's maybe kind of move the discussion a little bit into what you're actually seeing right now on the ground. And then we'll talk about some of the operations and things you've been involved in.
Right.
Where you're situated, obviously, you got interstates running through you. You're between two major cities. The cartel, the influence there is growing. But what are you seeing for numbers, maybe people wise? Like, are groups just growing there? I imagine the drug situation only grows, but are the people growing? Is the violence growing? What's kind of happening?
So people fluctuates, right? We just had an intelligence meeting yesterday with Border Patrol and some of our federal partners, and the humans coming across is dropping, and so it's going down a little bit,
Hmm.
but it's still very high comparatively. Like if you look back 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we're still way above those numbers as far as what's coming in monthly or annually, and we know that the cartel makes more money on bodies. And it's a commodity. They consider it a commodity, and it's a commodity that gets upfront payment. There's no dope that gets upfront payment. Like the
Yeah.
dope ships, and when it lands, it gets paid for, and then they get their money. Humans, they have to pay before they cross the international border into the U.S., and so those cartels are making money right there. And then if that human gets caught and sent back, the cartels make money again
Yeah.
because when they come back, they're charging them again. And so the numbers again they fluctuate, but I think at the beginning of the year we were seeing crazy numbers. You know, you're talking we were getting like 10,000 a week coming across, right? And so you're seeing crazy numbers,
That's insane.
and it overloaded our system. So Border Patrol was tasked out, so they're not doing their primary function because they're so tasked out. ICE, all of their beds are full, so they're at capacity. So it was just totally overloading our system. And if people don't understand that that's by design, the cartels knew it overloaded our system, and that gave them the opportunity to then freely move their dope, right next to those humans. And so they would a group of humans go through, and that takes all the cops and everything off of task.
Yeah.
And then behind that comes the dope, and the big dope that we see is meth and fentanyl.
Hmm.
And we in Arizona, if the world doesn't know this, we in Arizona are responsible for 50 to 60% of the fentanyl that goes throughout the U.S. comes through our state. So
Wow.
we are like a big source state for fentanyl, and the blue M30 pills, which are fake oxy, or the fentanyl powder, which is becoming more prevalent. Those are both things that we see a lot of.
One thing that you mentioned there too is like, so you're talking about the commodities, right? The people, the drugs coming through, and the cartel knows, okay, I'm going to overload this, right? They only got so many people and so many dollars to spend on this stuff. But what about the political narratives? Like, what's being said out there is not matching what's going on the ground.
Yeah,
And what I think a lot of the public doesn't realize is whether that politician themselves has a I don't know, some kind of slant to what they're trying to say, or they're trying to push a certain idea. Um, but they too might also be influenced by the cartel, right? So they're doing all these ops through the media, or pushing certain narratives, or calling everybody racist because they're just don't want to let people run through the border. Like that all helps the criminal element. So I imagine you guys are kind of a hotbed for the whole narrative.
yeah. We constantly have people from Washington who say they care. They'll sometimes they'll come down. They want to see the problem firsthand. And what we see most often with politicians is they are just a bunch of talking heads, and whatever side they're on, they're going to spew whatever narrative fits that party, right?
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter which side you're on. Um, you're going to say whatever your side believes. And I can tell you that both sides are full of shit.
Mhm.
They don't necessarily tell the truth all the time. And so for us on the ground, we try to educate people as much as possible. Like, hey, here's what's really going on. Like when we have media come out, we know they're probably not going to show um, the raw. Like, here's what's going on. but we take them out and we show them, here it is. Like, you tell us if you're true journalists, we're
Yeah.
just going to, and people are going to make their decision. But the media has become a tool, as you know, it's a propaganda tool now for political parties, and so it's very difficult anymore. And you really can't trust what you're getting from anywhere, from social media, from regular media. It's all so skewed, and so we just try, like for us as cops here working the problem, we just try to let people know, like, here's what's going on, here's what we see and have to deal with, and here's how we have to deal with it, and here's why it's a problem. And you, as Americans, you have to decide how you want to handle this problem, right? In my opinion, we should fire probably 95% of the people that we have hired to work for us in Washington who don't understand that concept,
Hmm.
and replace them with people who truly want to serve it. And I can give you an example of how corrupt our government system is. My sheriff ran for Senate, right? And he had an unsuccessful bid for Senate this year. And when he decided to run for Senate, their first question to him, they being the party, was, how much money do you think you can raise? He's like, why is that first question? Like, the first question should be, what do I stand for? What are my values? What are my beliefs?
Yeah.
But that's yeah.
Wow. The one of the things that I like doing here is bringing people on ride-alongs too, because you can then say, "Hey, I've shown you this." So if they start saying something truly different, you're like, "You were there. We saw the same thing together. So now I know what you're about, and that you also don't have our best interests at heart." Yeah, that's very interesting.
And I think the problem now, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, there's no accountability for anything, right? So anybody can say anything, believe anything, and then when they're called to task on it, they're just like, oh, well, whatever. Yeah, I lied, but so what?
Yeah.
And they're not held accountable. And so, that's a huge problem, right? Because if these politicians were held accountable for their statements and how they act, it would be a different world, because you could call them to task and say, wait a minute, like, I took you out and I showed you, and then you said the exact opposite of what you actually saw and know to be true,
Mhm.
but there's no accountability. So,
Yeah. Let's talk about on the ground and what you got going on for some of the operations. And, feel free to tell us some of the things that you've been involved with,
okay.
but just kind of what's going on out there. How do you combat cartel stuff at the front line?
So, I mean, it's a lot of traditional interdiction stuff, right? So we have, because people or drugs, they have to transport them, right? So they have to get from point A to point B, and so it's a lot of traditional methods. We have vehicle interdictions. There is some desert work that we do that looks much like border patrol work, where you have your people out in the desert looking for groups of people that a lot of times have drugs with them, that they're transporting up as part of their payment sometimes for them getting into the U.S. So a lot of traditional interdiction methods, and they do get more and more crafty, with every enforcement action. So every time we take an enforcement action and we catch them doing a certain thing, like if they're hiding it a certain way, and we catch them, they will almost immediately shift that and they'll hide it a new way. And
Yeah.
so it's a constant evolving game as far as the interdiction piece. Intelligence is obviously tougher and tougher with technology, because technology is advancing so much, and it's advancing in the favor of bad guys a lot of times, where they have encryption that we can't get through, or communications that we can't intercept or can't be a part of. And so it makes it tougher and tougher. But honestly, man, a lot of it still boils down to just good old fashioned cop work, because despite all the roadblocks, a lot of it is instinct,
Mhm.
and just putting two and two together, looking at evidence that you have, and then working sources is still a thing, right? So you always have sources of information that you can work and to work towards interdiction and put the cases together. So that's kind of how we combat it here. And obviously, with the two interstates, A lot of vehicle interdiction for
Yeah.
us.
You're speaking right to the heart of what we do up here. So the gang suppression work, the team I'm on, it's all overt, very in your face. It's talking to the people who running the show, the bad guys running the show, informant stuff. We get told by a lot of the bad guys that, and girls, because there are some girls in these groups, but the bad people, that they know our tactics. They know our investigative techniques. Up here, though, I think one of the differences, and correct me if I'm wrong, but so in Canada, we have some disclosure laws that are not very helpful for law enforcement. Basically, short of just giving away everything you have done on a file and all your techniques, like it's not great. I think US, you can not disclose quite a bit more. Like it's
Yeah.
a little more secretive. So we have that issue up here. Hence why also we have issues with some of the US trying to share information with us because they get scared that it's going to get disclosed how they found this out. So yeah, obviously there's the tactics and the techniques that police use. The other end of it is the legal side, the
Right.
laws that affect us and how we carry out our job to protect people. Is it very violent confrontations between police and cartel associates or members down there? Do you get a lot of clashes going on?
So traditionally, and it's still held true. I mean, of course, there are confrontations, but traditionally, the Mexican cartels have operated very much like the Italian mafia, right? They like to stay secretive. They like to stay off the radar with the cops. So
Hmm.
they still, for the most part, don't cross that line where they get just overly confrontational with us. Now, the caveat to that is that these younger narcos coming out of Mexico, they don't give a shit as much about the old rules and the old school and all that stuff. And so you do get those guys that are a lot more violent, a lot more confrontational, a lot more willing to go toe to toe with law enforcement. On the U.S. side, though, it has been kept in check because one thing that does hold true still is if they do get confrontational, they understand that that's going to bring a lot of attention and a lot more pressure on them, which affects business, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately running a business. Now, on the south side of the line in Mexico, completely different story because it's kind of a corrupt state. So there's daily confrontation and shootouts and homicides of law enforcement, of military, and then with each other. That's some of the when people ask me, is it safe to go to Mexico? I'm like, no, not really, because you don't know
Yeah.
when something's going to pop off between two cartels
Yeah.
and you're just caught in the middle. It's not like they're targeting you as an American. You just get caught in the middle of some stuff you didn't plan on.
Yeah. Yeah. I constantly say Mexico off the vacation list. I also not the biggest fan of hot weather, but um, yeah, yeah. So, do you see with the cartel there? Obviously, that's the biggest influence. Are you seeing the connections to lower gangs in the totem pole? I guess like and do you have influence from Hell's Angels? There is there, I don't know, other groups that you might see at a street level.
Yeah. The cartels understand, again, they run it like a business, so they understand distribution networks just like a Walmart or an Amazon does, right? So if you looked at the cartels as an Amazon, that's essentially what they are. They're the big dogs. They have all the supplies, and they know that they've got to have Amazon drivers and they've got to
Hmm.
have a distribution network. And so the local gangs and the outlaw motorcycle gangs, those all become distribution networks. They all, obviously, the local gangs and like the OMGs, they all have their own thing going. But when you're going to move certain dope, if you're going to move fentanyl or if you're going to move meth, that all goes back to Mexico, right? So it all has that Mexico tie. So you have to have some type of connection with the Mexican cartels. And again, the cartels need a distribution network to move their product and move more of their products. So they absolutely use those locals as a thing. And we have in Arizona, we used to be a Hell's Angel only state. But now we have the Mongols and the Vagos have both moved in pretty heavy. And so we're a disputed state. The Hells Angels, of course, still think it's their state. The Mongols think it's theirs. The Vagos think it's theirs. And they don't like each other. And now we even have some pagan presence.
Oh, really? Okay. Those groups, we have like some of them sparingly, kind of sparsely up here. There's a few other ones with different names, but yeah, the HA are kind of the predominant presence across Canada. I think it's always good to kind of lay out, especially even within the police service. People, I think, just get really stuck on the visibility of the Hells Angels or groups that show the overt signs. Like, I've got a patch, I'm super noticeable. That's like an easy target. But when you talk about cartels, I think everybody thinks it's guys with full face tats and they're walking around, acting a certain way. And it's like, no, these are business people. They're in suits. You would never think twice if you pulled them over. You'd be like, it's just some regular guy or whatever, So it's that whole out of sight, out of mind problem that we have. We have the exact same issues up here. The people always want to talk about the group that's the most visible. It's like, yeah, they're way down the totem pole. And even if you blow them up and their whole group disbands and everybody's gone, like, they'll just get replaced super easy because they're in the middle somewhere or at the bottom levels. But yeah, guys, I think you have a lot of similar operations to what we do up here. Do you find, in your experience, do you find that the longer drawn out investigations, are they really fruitful? Do they prove to be effective at stopping anything or slowing it down? Or do you find more the operational side where you're just constantly pressuring in people's faces, running informants, doing the quick hitters? Is that more effective, or, the long drawn out sort of stuff?
I think the long drawn out stuff is more effective for getting higher up the food chain. So those longer investigations where you're talking about wiretaps and stuff like that go 6 months, a year, 2 years. You're when you crash those down and you start making arrests, you're obviously making a lot more indictments. You're affecting more of the network. But we do know from doing those that a lot of times they stand it back up fairly quickly, right? So you may take out one network, but you have another network ready to step in, and you have to start another long investigation. So I think to answer your question, we're doing both. We're involved in the long investigations. Those are fruitful in some sense because you're getting more of the network and more of the hierarchy. But you can also do those smash and grab operations where you're just snatching people up, arresting them for what you can, getting them booked in, getting informants, and turning that stuff and working those smaller cases. And those can be fruitful too, because I think those have more of a community impact, right? Because those are those gangsters that are out on street corners, that type of stuff. And that's what you have a more visible effect on your community when you're smashing and grabbing those low and mid-level guys. And then those longer investigations, you're able to smash those higher level guys.
For you, any personal experiences, whether it was in SWAT or narcotics or the UC, where you're kind of, anything that really stands out in your mind is one of these operations where you're like, I don't know, it could be, holy shit, that was crazy. Or, maybe you felt like your life was on the line?
Yeah, there's been plenty of that, right? Because especially when we were like the heydays of when the Sinaloa cartel was really running rampant with marijuana was the big thing. It's before a lot of the legalization was taking place, and marijuana was one of their big cash crops. And the Sinaloa cartel kind of controls our state. And so there were plenty of those operations that, if you look at them, and I've had people make this comment when I talk about them, they're like, that sounds like a military operation. Well, it was essentially military maneuvers done by local cops. And we had to learn it on the fly a lot of times because while we might have some guys that are former military, we are not a military operation, right?
Yeah.
And there were some of those that get a little bit hairy because you're talking about, like when I first learned to drive a vehicle with no lights and night vision in the middle of the desert, you
Mhm.
make mistakes sometimes. That's a hard thing to learn, and you may have some small accidents here and there, or you may have some close calls, and then same thing when you're out on foot and you're under night vision and you're chasing guys in the middle of the desert who are armed and trying to get their product from point A to point B. And there's times where you know I think the potential for violence is much higher because you're just out in the middle of nowhere, and
Yeah.
they have a job to do and their life depends on their job. Like if they don't get a load through or they lose a load to the cops, like they're not going to get written up. They're going to get beat or killed. And so they have a lot more on the line to lose when we are trying to take those loads from them. And so that there were several situations where we would get done and we were like, holy shit, like that was crazy. Like I'll give you an example of some of the holy shit moments where when you're in a high speed chase with a stolen vehicle full of dope in the middle of the desert and nobody has their lights on and
Yeah.
you're driving with night vision and you may have a little bit of ambient light from the moon, but that's it. And that can get a little hairy.
Yeah. Are you finding so a lot of the people working on the cartel side of things, whether you're finding them out in the desert or mountains or something, are they American citizens or are they hiring a lot of people that have crossed over illegally somehow?
So it really depends, man. It depends on the organization, what they're doing. So if you're moving money and stuff like that, typically speaking, you have like family ties or close ties to that cartel because that's their money and they don't trust just anybody with that, right?
Yeah.
If you're moving dope, a lot of times those are peripherals. So those are people that are lower level part of the organization, sometimes illegals, but they switch their game up. And so, like right now, I can tell you what they're doing is they're using social media to recruit U.S. citizens to move people and drugs. And so they're getting on social media, whether it be Snapchat or whatever, and advertising like, "Hey, do you want to make $2,000? Come down to Nogales, and you can make a couple grand." And so these
That's
people,
crazy.
these U.S. citizens, they're doing, yeah, it's nuts.
I talked to a guy on here before, Chris Dalby. So he writes a lot on the CJ&G, and
Mm.
he was talking about how they recruit through video games
Yep.
and just on the chat rooms and stuff. And I was like, it's just full frontal assault. Like the cartel are doing everything everywhere at all times. Just like, wow, that's overwhelming. Man, yeah, you know what? We're just coming up to the end of the time. So I want to make sure I give you a chance to just talk about your book.
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet, but I picked it up this morning because I saw it on the bio you sent over. So yeah, what was writing the book like? And some of the stuff you want to tell us, like maybe what's in there or what people should expect from it.
Yeah. So writing a book was nothing like I expected, right? I started it. I kind of thought, well, you write all this stuff, and we're cops, right? So we're used to writing reports, and we're used to covering all the when, where, what, why, how, and chronological order, and all that stuff, right? So I went through and I wrote this, and it was about a 3-year process from start to finish of getting everything on paper.
Wow.
And because I had a job, so I would just do it, in my spare time. And then you have to understand when you get into writing like for a book, you really kind of have to be in the mood, man. Because there would be days where I would sit down and I would just stare at the keyboard and I'd be like, nothing's coming, it's just like
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, what's the motivation for it? Like what got you even to think about writing a book?
So a couple things, man. One of the things was that was one of the driving forces was that this was a piece or is a piece of American history that nobody really knew about. Like nobody knew the operations that we were doing were really going on other than cops in our world.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a piece of American history. And the sheriff had told me at one point, we were talking about it, and he's like, man, nobody will ever know this took place if somebody doesn't, document it. And I'm like, yeah, that's crazy.
That's the spark.
yeah, and so, and I worked with some great people, and I worked next to like some just badass, heroic guys and gals that did a lot of good work. And I wanted to document that. I wanted to get it down on paper so people knew like this is what was going on and is going on. And here's the no bullshit version of what we're dealing with as cops on the ground, right? And so that was kind of the motivation that got me into it. And like I said, I sat down and it took me about 3 years of a weekend here or an evening there
Mhm.
of typing out a few pages and eventually got a manuscript done and then I had to muddle my way through turning that into a book.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta get people to pick it up and kinda like the story, I guess, and be okay with publishing it. I'll put up a link in the episode description so people can check it out. As I said, I picked it
Yeah.
up this morning, so I'm definitely gonna get through it.
And just, I mean, for real quick too,
Yeah.
to on the book notes so that people have an understanding. Um, it has some stories about our operations in there. That's probably the back half of the book. But I understood that to tell those stories, I needed to first kind of lay some groundwork about who I am, how I know what I know, and then some groundwork on the cartels themselves, so they have an understanding when they start reading the operations. They're like, oh, I know, why that is that way, or I know
Mhm.
how they operate. So I kind of start off with myself, telling a little bit about myself, my upbringing, my immersion into the Mexican culture, and how I know what I know about that. And then I go into the cartels and how we see them structured here and how we dealt with them. And then I also talk a little bit about the narco culture itself so that they have an understanding. That is a culture of its own, the narco culture is,
Mhm.
because it's kind of it's a mixture of the Mexican culture, the narcos. There's some religion mixed in there, so it's a lot of blended things that becomes this narco culture, and then it goes into the operations. So by the time they hit operations and they're full speed into the stuff we were doing, they have a good understanding of what we were looking at.
Very cool. Well, I'll have to get you back on once I finish reading it, and then we'll get an update on how things are going down there and talk more
Yeah.
about culture and some of that counterinsurgency type stuff. I usually finish off with just if you got any social media or websites or anything where people can find you, follow your work, anything that you have.
Absolutely. So I do have a website. It is all one word, onetimenation.com. And that's where they can see a little bit about me. I have a bio there, and I have some of the stuff I've done, and then of course they can get the book there as well. And then social media, I'm pretty much solo active on Instagram, and my handle there is at deputy, like deputy sheriff, deputy underscore one time. And yeah, that's it, man.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to say thanks for coming on today. It's a good conversation. Talking about the front lines, it's always fun.
Absolutely.
Hang on the line for 2 seconds. I'll say bye offline.
You got it.